Good evening, everybody. Pursuant to recently adopted amendments to the Illinois Open Meetings Act included in Public Act 101-0640, public bodies may in certain circumstances hold entirely virtual public meetings without a quorum physically present in any one location. Under authority granted to me on May 20th, 2021, I issued a declaration of emergency to address the health threat posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Also on May 2021, I execute a written determination that given the ongoing emergency associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, in-person meetings of the Board of Trustees are not practical or prudent. On May 28, 2021, Governor Pritzker issued his most recent disaster proclamation and Executive Order 2021-11 that declared in-person attendance at public meetings of more than 10 people at the regular public meetings location to be infeasible in accordance with the Open Meetings Act as amended by Public Act 101-0640. In accordance with the above actions, I have also determined that in-person meetings of the Board of Trustees are not practical or prudent at this time. I should say it's likely that this is it, and I think everyone is hoping that our next meetings will be in the boardroom and public according to the old way we used to do it. This committee of the whole meeting is being conducted virtually with members participating through the Zoom webinar platform. The village manager is in the Village Hall Council chamber as required by the Open Meetings Act. Phil, do we have everybody, or are we still waiting for people?
Still waiting on Trustee Mulvaney, but we can do a roll call and get started. We do have a pretty heavy agenda tonight, so
okay.
I think.
All right, let's do a roll call. I'm
All
sure
right.
Peter will be here.
Trustee Hallwax.
Here.
Trustee Listener.
Here.
Trustee Mulvaney. Trustee Onderdonk.
Here.
Trustee Rubin.
Here.
Trustee Vree.
Here.
President Rowan.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Okay. The first agenda item is public comment. In accordance with the supplemental rule the board approved on April 16, 2020, here's how public comment will be taken at this meeting. The email address and telephone number designated for public comment for this meeting were published with the meeting agenda. At this point, I'll ask our assistant to the village manager, Jordan Lester, to read public comments that were submitted prior to the meeting on non-agenda items. Public comments on agenda items will be read when the agenda item is discussed. If a member of the public would like to submit a public comment during the meeting, please email your comment to glencoemeeting@villageofglencoe.org. And comments submitted during the meeting may be read at the end of the meeting. Written comments must be limited to 400 words if you want it to be read. Even if it's not read, if we get it, we consider it. Jordan, did we get public comments?
President Rowan, yes, we did receive public comment. However, I will note they are for agenda items only. We did not receive public comment on non-agenda items.
Okay, then pursuant to the plan, we'll take the public comments up when we get to the agenda items. So that takes us to our first agenda item, which is a discussion regarding the possibility of year-round outdoor dining on public property and village right-of-way. I'll ask Assistant to the Village Manager, Jordan Lester, and Administrative Intern, Emily Spangler, to present concerning this. And again, we just got a memo from Emily about this, which was very helpful, but Jordan and Emily, take it away.
Thank you very much, President Rowan, and good evening, trustees and members of the public. Give me one moment to get our PowerPoint up on the screen. Please let me know when you are able to see it. As President Rowan mentioned, it is my pleasure to be sharing this information with you this evening with Administrative Intern Emily Spangler. Can you see my screen okay?
We can, Jordan, but it's not in presentation mode.
Okay, give me 1 second. Is it now?
It is.
Wonderful, thank you. So as President Rowan alluded to, tonight we will be asking for, we'll be presenting to you on outdoor dining and asking the board's feedback on outdoor dining on public property. So as a bit of background on this, and as the board is well aware, we are in the fifth and final stage of Governor Pritzker's Restore Illinois plan, and which means all businesses in all sectors of the economy can reopen at full capacity. As such, we are seeking the board's feedback, preliminary feedback, on the future of outdoor dining on public property. It's important to note that our conversation this evening will be about public property, not private property. So as a reminder for all those that are listening, pre-pandemic, the village allowed downtown restaurants to have sidewalk seating through the village's outdoor seating permit process. So this free process allowed restaurants to apply to have sidewalk tables and chairs and heating lamps during approved parts of the summertime. The season would start April 1st of each year and conclude at November 30th of each year. In addition, also pre-pandemic, in the winter of 2019 and then early 2020, the village also permitted Hometown Coffee and Juice to have igloos on public sidewalks. However, during the pandemic, the village adapted to the needs of our business community and developed new strategies to help our restaurants, particularly when indoor dining capacity was either completely restricted or significantly restricted. So examples of these new strategies are including expanded outdoor dining past the November 30th deadline. The village in the summer of 2020 developed our auxiliary outdoor seating area, or OSA, in our village court parking lot, which Valor Restaurant took advantage of. And then, of course, as we still have some of them today, the village permitted restaurants to have greenhouses, igloos, or other tent structures on public sidewalks. So at this time, I will ask Administrative Intern Emily Spangler to continue with our presentation. Emily? Emily, you might be muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay,
Thank you.
wonderful. One moment, please. Okay, technology is great. So going into our current environment, as the board is aware, Guildhall is using 7 parking spaces total and Valor is using 8 parking spaces total. Moving forward, Guildhall has expressed interest in continuing to utilize village parking spaces for its greenhouse structures or other structures they may think of. Other restaurants, including True Juice and the proposed Poppy Social, are expected to be interested in expanded options as well. Currently, there are 16 authorized spaces in the downtown, originally planned to be used during peak hours. So we have an apple a day, Foodstuff, Guildhall, and Valor. They are using 3 parking spaces. Valor is using 4 spaces. Both residents and businesses alike have had mixed opinions on the number of spaces that are being used. Although the restaurant's expanded dining operations have been mostly welcomed by the community, residents have expressed some negative feedback about the ongoing impact of expanded options on downtown parking. Therefore, we're seeking the board's feedback on possible continuation of the expanded outdoor dining program. Next slide, please. If the board wants to continue with the expanded outdoor dining option, we're asking feedback on the following concepts. Just to preface, we are not looking for program specifics. Rather, we are asking for guidance on what direction the village board would like to go or not to go. So the first one is permitted locations. Staff is not recommending changes to the village's regular sidewalk seating. Rather, we're trying to see if the board wants parking spaces or village parking lots to be permitted locations for restaurant operations moving forward. Secondly, the program duration. Staff is requesting feedback on what the duration of a permitted outdoor dining should be. For example, if it should be a year-round program or a seasonal program. Going into license agreements, previously Guildhall, Hometown Coffee, and Valor are currently operating under license agreements that they signed on to for their outdoor structures, which lasts through November 30th. If the board is not interested in continuing expanded outdoor dining, either the village or the business may terminate a licensing agreement at any time and for any reason with 60 days prior notice. So staff recommends continuing licensing agreements to be required if outdoor dining is continued to be expanded. Going into appearance review, staff has received varying feedback from residents and businesses about the appearance of dining structures. Staff recommends requiring businesses to comply with appearance reviews or specific appearance standards. This would provide for minimum requirements and maintain a cohesive aesthetic in our downtown. Finally, last but not least, is fees and charges. We're seeking input on whether a fee should be assessed for the use of parking spaces and parking lots. Not many communities around Glencoe have imposed a fee for the use of parking spaces, but the City of Highland Park is considering it. The City of Highwood also requires a $500 annual fee for the use of parking stalls. Next slide, please. Looking to other communities, other municipalities are also in the process of evaluating year-round outdoor dining options. Communities near Glencoe that implemented new COVID-19 outdoor dining programs were surveyed. We dispersed of that survey, and very few have definitive year-round programs in place. There are two examples to share with you. First is the village of Deerfield. They recently, they extended a year-round outdoor dining program on village property during their June 2021 board meeting about 2 weeks ago. And this pilot started in June 2020, but the outdoor dining options are on private property. Secondly, the village of Arlington Heights has an outdoor dining program called Arlington Alfresco, which establishes full street closure. And that was launched in summer of 2020 and was reestablished in March 2021 when the weather warmed up. But recently, Arlington Heights decided to conclude its program, ending it in late September 2021. So it is unknown if Arlington Alfresco will be resumed in 2022. Next slide, please.
If I may, real quick, Emily, I just wanted to make a slight clarification about the
On
village of
Deerfield,
Deerfield.
yes,
Yes.
thank you.
No, you're doing a great job. So to clarify, trustees, the village of Deerfield, although with their expanded outdoor dining options, it gives the ability to be on public property. We spoke with some of their manager's office staff, and they clarified that either 99 to 100% of their approved requests or requests in general are on private property. If you're familiar with the downtown environment of Deerfield, that's quite different than the village of Glencoe. They have a lot of setback private property and shopping malls, if you will, for lack of a better termination. So to clarify, they have extended this throughout the duration of calendar year 2021, but it's important to note that the majority, if not all, of the requests have been on private property. All right, we'll go to the next slide.
Thank you for clarification. I appreciate it.
Of course.
So on to our next slide. Also related to public property use, staff is in the process of reviewing the downtown parking environment in Glencoe. We've been having conversations with downtown businesses regarding their future parking needs in Phase 5 and beyond environments. As noted, there has been concern with the parking impact of expanded outdoor dining and temporary carryout parking spaces. Staff has received feedback about the number and location of existing downtown 2-hour and 15-minute parking spaces. We're all living through a new normal where business models, along with parking spaces, and those needs have changed following the pandemic, hence the need for these conversations and reviews. Next slide, please. So just to go back in sum, these are the concepts the staff is asking the board to consider regarding the potential expansion of outdoor dining. Next slide. If the board expresses interest in continuing with long-term expanded outdoor dining options, we will develop preliminary program recommendations based on the feedback received. We will also provide the board with additional parking analysis information that we may implement changes in the near term, including the removal of some number of curbside pickup spaces or the reduction of the number of 15-minute parking spaces. So at this time, we are asking for the board's feedback on the subject matter, and we welcome any questions.
And I think, let me just say, before everybody gets into their questions, in order to frame the issues. I mean, one question is, we've done a bunch of things for COVID, and outdoor dining made sense with COVID, and it also could make sense during the summer. But there's a question about, do we want to continue this after it gets cold? So that's sort of one area to consider. And another is what to do about igloos and things like igloos. And again, the igloos made particular sense during COVID and maybe don't make sense anymore. And a third question is what to do about parking spots that are being taken, because Glencoe famously has had a parking problem in the village for, 100 years, and this may exacerbate that. And then let me mention one other thing, which is the owners at Guildhall have views on this, and they would like to make a short presentation. And I think maybe we can hear from the board first, and then we'll give the Guildhall folks a chance to make a short presentation, unless the sense of the board is they'd like to hear from Guildhall first. With that, I'll just open it up if you have questions. I'm not going to call on anybody, but if you have questions, raise your hand, and then we'll proceed. Dudley.
Could we hear from Guildhall first? I'd like to see their perspective.
I'm totally okay with that, but I didn't want to, if board members wanted to say something first, I didn't want to preclude that. But if we don't hear from anybody, I think it's fine to hear from Guildhall, and it might even make sense in terms of framing the conversation. I mean, I think I agree with Dudley, but I didn't want to. Anybody have any views? If not, why don't we let the Guildhall folks make a short presentation, and by short I mean 3 or 4 minutes.
Jordan, if you can move, I think Jeff Shapek is going to be the one doing the presentation and sharing his screen.
Both Jeff and Jennifer, you've been promoted to panelists, and I will also promote Jerry Muldoon to panelist as well if needed. If there are any other representatives from Guildhall that I'm missing, please let me know.
Yeah, a gentleman named Thomas Leonard should be on the Zoom as well.
Okay, one moment, please. Thomas, 1 second. Thomas, you should be able to speak and share your camera now, if you would need to.
Jeff, why don't you go ahead with the presentation?
Perfect. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Jordan. I just want to make sure. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. This is basically a very brief presentation that we put together on our response, working with the village of Glencoe for the COVID-19 pandemic. As you all remember well, March 15th was a day that none of us want to remember, but that was the day in which we were told everything had to be shuttered, all bars, sit-in dining in the state of Illinois. We immediately launched a takeaway business, which had not existed in a significant manner before March 15th of 2020. We did that, one, to, of course, keep the restaurant open, but also to be able to provide takeaway business for the village of Glencoe and the residents. On June 3rd, we made the decision to launch a pop-up sushi and sake pop-up called Toridasu. We did that in a now empty restaurant at the bar, and essentially did that to provide Glencoe and surrounding areas who eat and spend time in Glencoe to have more dining options. On June 20th of 2020, we began collaborating with the village of Glencoe, specifically with Phil Corrali and staff, as well as our adjacent neighbors. And we launched outdoor dining on the sidewalk, of course, distanced per CDC guidelines. And we're very grateful for everyone's support in allowing us to do that and have the space necessary to meet said guidelines. On September 11th of 2020, we continued to collaborate with the village of Glencoe. We did that to create a space for greenhouses in the public right-of-way on Vernon Avenue, and came in front of you and many others within the village to present this plan that we put together. We actually also met with the village and our neighbor Reach Yoga to gain her support to make sure she had proper branding visibility. This was the plan that we presented, and we actually built from this plan. It was 12 greenhouses in the public right of way. They occupy, and to clarify earlier, it was said that we have 7 parking spaces. We actually only have 4 parking spaces that we use on an ongoing day in, day out, 7-day a week, 24 hours a day basis. The other 3 spaces, which are shown here, are only used in the evening for pickup. During the day, they're in front of the bank building and they're blinker spots. In the evening, we use them for pickup in order to not cause traffic backed up on Vernon at an important intersection of Park and Vernon with the stop signs. On November 23rd, 2020, Guildhall safely erected those 12 greenhouses. We did paint a concrete barricade, built it rather, then painted it, branded it, that crash wall, and then topped it with boxwoods. We've actually redone all of that more than once in order to keep it fresh looking and appropriate. And that was to the tune of a $100,000 investment. But by doing all of that, it allowed us to continue to serve the community and allow all of Glencoe that wanted to eat out in a safe environment to do so. And on December 5th, we opened that following CDC guidelines, welcoming everyone back to Guildhall in this environment, and followed all cleaning, health, wellness, and safety protocols. This is an image from yesterday morning, early in the morning, to be able to show you what it looks like and its impact on the basically in the public realm and the streetscape. On February 4th, 2021, almost 1 year later, it was very exciting news to enter phase 4, as you remember, and we were able to have indoor dining resume, but with limited capacity. All of these initiatives were such that we were able to keep Guildhall open throughout an entire pandemic. We retained all 57 team members. We've collected Village of Glencoe 1% tax, and we've been able to pay our rent and CAM in full, which contributes to our property taxes here in the Village of Glencoe. There are 345 parking spaces by count from what we've been able to determine. We have eliminated shown spaces on this map. That is a GIS map that's public information because we believe that those are private spaces to the Grand and others. So we've eliminated that from our count. Of the 345 parking spaces, the Guildhall Greenhouse project occupies exactly 3.5 spaces. We use 4. We're really only on 3.5, but I'm going to use the number 4. That's 1.2% of total 345 available spaces in this area that I'm showing on the map. For our pickup, which again, I can't stress enough, that is an evening only pickup in order to not create traffic on Vernon Avenue in a backup. We occupy less than 1% of spaces in downtowns, in the villages downtown. These are some headlines from around the world and around the country in major cities from Paris to San Francisco to Seattle and New York and LA of what's going on in public right of way. This is in New York City with streeteries, San Francisco outdoor seating, Paris in the street, Boston in the street, blocking traffic. This is in Chicago from earlier today on Randolph. These are being built up and down Randolph and Fulton in front of all of the restaurants. This is now, I'll move away from big cities because I appreciate that we are not in a big city, but this is an example of Lake Bluff. This is Scranton Avenue, and this is actually not just blocking parking spaces, it's actually taking over the entire street on the south side, making Scranton a one-way street for one full block in order to accommodate all of this outdoor seating. This is in Highwood, which was referenced earlier in the presentation to the board. Winnetka, I'm sorry for the blurry picture. We had to find one online of what Toco is doing in downtown Winnetka on their square on public right of way on the street. We wanted to share that information with you tonight. So you know from, oops, trying to unshare my screen. Sorry. So you know from our perspective how important it is that we've made this investment, and we believe by making this investment, it allowed us to be able to serve the community, continue to serve the community, both indoor and outdoor. We're very hopeful that we obviously are not faced with a future strand of COVID, that if we were to take this down and be faced with that, we're in no position financially to go and rebuild what we've already built if we take it down. So that's one thing that definitely concerns us. Not to mention the, sorry, let me think. Oh, I know that we have spoken to Phil Corrali. We are absolutely open, like many municipalities and major cities charge fees to be able to use public right of way. We're absolutely open to that and don't take issue with that whatsoever. And then a couple of other just very quick, and I know it's limited time, but a couple of other comments is it's our opinion that even with the pandemic and certainly now coming out of the pandemic, that downtown Glencoe is flourishing more than ever. We believe that food and beverage is absolutely part of what's driving that. It's the beating heart of the business district. I'm not saying that retail and service isn't equally as important, but I think that they beget one another. And it's very important that we continue to maintain what we have. To pay a compliment to Louis Rubin, who I hope is on the Zoom tonight. If you look at his corner where hometown is today, and you look back 4 and 5 years ago, there was never this many people in this community sitting outside and being around each other, even in a pandemic. And all of this, we believe, has been very good for downtown Glencoe. And as it relates to parking, we would rather work with you to figure out, are all of the businesses, ours included, having their employees park in the proper spaces? Because while I referenced 348, there's also B permit parking of 344 spaces, which get us to a total of 768 spaces. And we would rather focus on making sure that's happening, so that way employees of businesses are not using spaces that others should be using in order to shop and eat at these businesses. That's it. Thank you very much. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for a thorough and excellent presentation. Let me ask one question, and I'll open up to the board. Why do we need this? I get your point about if there's another pandemic, you don't want to have to rebuild what you've built. But put that one aside. Why do you need this in the winter? I mean, outdoor dining in Chicago in the winter has never been a thing.
Sorry, I was on mute. I don't disagree with you. I spend a lot of time in Chicago. My business is in Chicago. I think that the pandemic changed a lot. And I think that I'll use one neighborhood called Fulton Market District in the greater West Loop of Chicago. The amount of outdoor dining that happened during the winter and is continuing to happen even where we're at with COVID is it's never been seen before. I mean, ironically, this has been going on in Europe for generations. People ate outside even in cold weather climates. May not be Chicago's weather, but it's cold weather climates. So I believe that people are still going to want to do this even 6 months and a year from now. And we're not here tonight asking you to give us this right into perpetuity and it never goes away. We just know that we invested 6 figures to build it. We would like longer than the current license agreement of November. And for us to reinvest in it right now, because those greenhouses are getting warm inside, we don't want to continue to invest in it to only find out in a few months they have to be taken down, and then it wasn't worth continuing to invest. Not to mention, we may never even get our investment out of it because we didn't have enough time with them in order to get the investment back. But we do believe you'll see it all major cities, and that's why these mayors are making the decision to allow all of this outdoor dining in these streeteries all across the country. And we're hopeful that municipalities on the North Shore of Chicago see that in Chicago and recognize the importance of it. And it's allowing downtown Chicago in certain parts right now to thrive where they have not been able to thrive in an entire year.
Okay. Board members, do you have questions for the staff or for the Guildhall folks?
Yeah,
Okay.
I do. So I'm just wondering, so how are you planning to retrofit the greenhouses for summer use? You know, I understand obviously in the cooler weather, but how do you plan on using them during the warm weather months?
I'm just trying to pull something up, Gail, right now.
Sure.
Phil, am I able to share the document that I shared with you guys when I presented a concept from us?
Totally up to you.
Thank you. Sorry, it'll be just 1 second.
Okay.
We had come up with a number of options, Gail. One was to retrofit the existing greenhouses in order for them not to be so warm. We've already invested in putting a film on top of them to try and cool them off by blocking the sun coming into them, but we need to do more. And we're sort of at a crossroads right now as to what to do and what to spend. This was a presentation that we had made to Phil and had shared with him as one option. And this option was taking inspiration from a restaurant called Balthazar. They're not the only ones doing this. They're just one example we found when we were in New York City, and we're very impressed with it. This was for inspiration purposes only. Now, when we presented this and came up with this idea, we were not in phase 5 at the time. So the concept here was that this space would allow us to put plexiglass between all of the diners to keep everyone safe. But the concept, again, was to take down what we had and build this structure. And I can show you some renderings. It was not going to be in green, and these are kind of very hokey looking renderings, so it would look much better than this. But this was to give an idea of something that we could create in the exact same space where we have the greenhouses today. And this would be one option of what we could do in order to provide an area that people could continue to dine outside in a safe environment, feel comfortable being outside if they're still not ready to be back inside. I have not checked the numbers recently. The village is very good about posting information, but I remember as of a few weeks ago, we were just crossing 50% vaccinated in Glencoe, not to mention children under the age of 12, which I'm sure we have a lot of them. I certainly have a few of those. They are not vaccinated. So the ability to continue to sit outside, we think, is a huge benefit for this community. And this was a way to keep you dry if it started to rain. One of the hardest things in a business for food and beverage is you have people sitting outside and it starts to rain and then it gets windy. And then people say, I don't want to be in this condition. And they come running into your restaurant and you can't seat them anywhere. And this gives us the opportunity to continue to seat people in a safe environment and in a dry environment. So this was just one option, Gail. Obviously, another one would be tables and chairs and umbrellas. But that, to us, while that's compelling because that's a great environment, that doesn't deal with summers where we have rain.
So let me ask, what happens to the 100 grand you just spent on the existing structures if you're going to build this?
Well, the greenhouses will store. Those come apart and we save those. A lot of the structure we spent money on has to do with, if you see this concrete crash wall, that was done for safety. We worked very closely with Dave Mao and Phil and other staff members at Village of Glencoe to design this. That's a $10,000 concrete wall with $2,500 worth of paint. That was done so you wouldn't have concrete barricades like you see on the highway sitting on Vernon.
Right. Okay. So the plan is you're going to have a summer outdoor dining and a winter outdoor dining and this is one concept. So yes. I'd say in general to the board, and I think staff, you did a great job with this. I do think we need to consider the continuity of how everything is going to look. If we've got this structure with Guildhall and Hometown's got igloos and Valor has something else, I don't know. Is that what we want, or is there a way to get some sort of continuity with what our outdoor is going to look like?
Well, I want to add one quick thing, if I may, is we purposely, when we started with our greenhouses, we worked closely with the Village of Glencoe and Louis Rubin to make sure we all matched at the time.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think if we could figure that out, it'd be great.
We have her, so let me just throw out, because so it's not all sweetness and light. We have gotten some comments from residents. What happened to the nice quaint downtown where you could walk down the sidewalk? And we've also got some comments from other businesses who said, what happened to our parking spots? Our customers have to have a harder time getting to us. And why are you subsidizing these other businesses? And those are not frivolous points.
President Rowan, it may be worthwhile to read into the record the various public comments that we've received on this agenda item, so that the board has that information. You alluded to them just a moment ago, and yeah, I think
that seems like a great idea. Jordan, are you on reading those?
Yes, President Rowan, give me one moment.
Okay.
All right, to clarify, these are the public comments that we've received for this agenda item, and they are as follows. Our first public comment is from Betsy McRue, and Betsy's comment is, I'm frankly surprised that Guildhall would even entertain the idea of those, what can I say, eyesore structures. Their food is good, but let's keep the food inside, please. That was Betsy's comment. Our second comment is from Sergei Slavinsky at 376 South Avenue, and Sergei's comment is as follows. Hello, I would like to express my opposition to restaurants permanently or for extended periods of time using public property and right-of-way. COVID is almost over, inside dining is allowed, and there is no reason to have ugly structures pollute the view of our downtown. I understand that owners of restaurants would have higher profits and the town would collect more taxes. However, our beautiful downtown Glencoe is not the place for that. It is one of the best communities in the country to live in, and let's keep it this way. And that was Sergei's comment. Our next comment is from resident Barney Gallagher, and Barney's comment is as follows. My name is Barney Gallagher. I live at 550 Green Bay Road. When reviewing the agenda for this evening's Committee of the Whole meeting, I was surprised to see that the village is even considering the extension of measures, which were supportable in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic and resulting lockdown. We are back to normal, so can we please reclaim normalcy in our downtown? What possible justification can there be for continuing the visual clutter and inconvenience to other merchants and residents that the current emergency policy represents? Respectfully, Barney Gallagher. Our next comment is from Adrian Gallagher, also at 550 Green Bay Road, and Adrian's comment is as follows. I am writing to express my opposition to allowing restaurants to have ongoing, year-round dining on public property and right-of-way. I understood and agreed that this was the right thing to do to help our restaurants get through COVID, but now please give us back our downtown. Had I wanted to live in a visually cluttered downtown, I would not have come to Glencoe. Furthermore, it's unfair to businesses other than restaurants to allow the restaurant exterior structures to take parking spaces and clutter the streetscape. Aesthetically, I long for our downtown to be what it was before COVID. Sincerely, Adrian Gallagher. Our next comment comes from a local business. It comes from J. Terry Ross. The comment is submitted by Mark and Terry Ross. And President Rowan, with your permission, this is a little bit longer than 400 words. If I may read it in its entirety into the record.
Okay, talk fast.
Will do. And the Ross's comments are as follows. The COVID pandemic has doubtless wreaked havoc on thousands of large and small businesses, forcing a very large percentage of those businesses to close their doors forever. And while we applaud the Village of Glencoe for its efforts to bolster up local restaurant owners, we don't think you realize that you've been robbing Peter to pay Paul. We are referring specifically to the restaurants being allowed to set up tents on what has always been a sore point of doing business in Glencoe, a very serious lack of parking spaces. These tents are taking up approximately 16 to 20 valuable and much needed parking spaces. This doesn't make sense to me when the space restrictions have been eliminated for indoor seating. Some of the restaurants already were using the sidewalk for seating even before the pandemic, and our observations have shown that most of these tents are vacant until the dinner hour anyway. Speaking for our own business, this lack of parking has caused us to lose more than a few well-paying clients. We also lost 2 of our best employees, and attempts to replace them with artists of similar skill levels has been totally unsuccessful. As soon as they saw the parking situation, they said their clients would never put up with us, wished us well, and turned us down. And now that COVID is winding down, it almost seems like restaurants are taking advantage of the situation as they open new services, curb service, in those once public parking spaces. This sad situation is also affecting our seniors. It is not realistic to expect them to walk long distances from their out of the way parking spaces. If you would be so good, I would respectfully ask that you consider revoking all permissions that allow using our streets to assist this one industry, while the rest of us are left without the compassion that the restaurants are currently enjoying. If the return of our streets seems an unfair request, much less desirable but better than nothing, as the tents are for the most part vacant until the dinner hour, how about having their employees move these tents off the streets and onto the sidewalk during the day? I'm sure they could be put back in time for the dinner hour when many other businesses are closed anyway. Again, I realize this was an effort by the city to assist the restaurants during a very difficult period, but you have seemed to have forgotten that the rest of us are rest of us are suffering as well. Some businesses are hanging by a thread, while the restaurants are enjoying an influx of people who enjoy dining al fresco. This is a very serious situation for all of the non-food related businesses who have stuck by the village for many years. Isn't it time that the village recognizes the rest of us? With regards, Mark and Terry Ross. Our next comment is from Brooke Wharton, and Brooke's comment is as follows. Dear Board of Trustees, I write today to raise awareness and voice residential concerns regarding outdoor dining in Glencoe. As the board considers this subject, please pay close attention to the intersection between the commercial downtown and surrounding residential properties. A specific example and great area of concern to the neighbors of the 600 block of Vernon is the patio proposed behind the anticipated Poppy Social. This potential patio is intimately surrounded on 3 sides by apartments, townhomes, and homes of Glencoe residents. There's very little distance between this proposed patio and the bedroom windows of more than 50 people, including children. The apartment building to the south has approximately 33 units. There are 6 townhomes just north of the space. There are 5 homes on Greenwood and 1 on Hazel that back up to the narrow alley adjacent to this space. Putting diners in this area will negatively impact the daily lives of the people residing on the patio perimeter. Furthermore, many speculate outdoor dining in this space would negatively impact the property value for these residents. I ask the board to please be thoughtful of the commercial district's next door residential neighbors during these discussions. Thank you for your service to our amazing village, Brooke Wharton, 675 Greenwood Avenue. Our next comment is from Josh Hilton, and Josh's comment is as follows. Board of Trustees, the agenda this evening focused on outdoor dining is a timely one. In parallel to this broader discussion about outdoor dining in the village, there are also plans under consideration by the village for an outdoor dining area in the rear space of 668 Vernon Avenue as part of a new restaurant called Poppy Social. This new dining area is located less than 50 feet from multiple homes and residences on 3 sides of the patio, has planned seating for more than 80 people, has plans to host live music regularly, and has no proposed sound mitigation plans. Given these conditions, there is significant concern from the surrounding neighbors about the impact of the proposed patio on the quality of life for residents in the area. Today, the audible noise in the downtown district from existing outdoor dining operations is significant under currently allowed public operations, but also largely contained to the streets and public areas of the village. My concern as a homeowner and a direct neighbor to this newly proposed patio is that similar levels of noise, if not higher and later into the night, given higher seating capacity and proposed hours of operation, will now be directly adjacent to the homes and residences that surround this space, homes and residences that have young children, adults working from home, and elderly residents. The December 2016 Village Plan for Downtown specifically notes that, quote, the activities within downtown must be careful to respect the edges in the transitions between downtown and the surrounding residential neighborhoods, and more and bigger may be the conventional wisdom of business district development. But the community surrounding the downtown is a well-tailored fit, which should not be altered, unquote. I think it's important to note that these principles of development were supported by the market analysis completed by the village's special consultant for economic development at the time and are highly relevant to this conversation. As you have your discussion tonight, I would ask that you consider in this forum and others the impact of outdoor dining broadly, and specifically an outdoor patio behind 668 Vernon, on the surrounding residences and how the village can address the concerns raised by residents and property owners that this patio will have an impact on. Sincerely, Josh Hilton. Our next comment is from resident Jay Schmiel, and Jay's comment is as follows. Number 1, Glencoe has spent and continues to spend considerable public funds cleaning and renovating downtown sidewalks. Restaurants, however, have crowded these sidewalks all the way to the curb with tables, chairs, and serving stations, thereby reducing pedestrian access to very narrow paths. Downtown public sidewalks should be easily accessible by all, not just by the few who eat at certain restaurants. Number 2, the Glencoe Public Works Department devotes considerable effort to maintaining the overall appearance of downtown Glencoe. Does Glencoe want to project the image of the architecturally acclaimed structure on Tudor Court or of the tacky concrete barriers, igloos, greenhouses, and tents on Vernon Avenue? Number 3, while it's commendable that staff are having conversations with downtown businesses, it should be remembered that their commercial neighbors are not the only users of downtown parking spaces. Patients of Glencoe healthcare providers, visitors to Village Hall and Post Office, and Glencoe Library patrons also use these scarce resources. Number 4, now that Governor Pritzker has removed restaurant capacity limitations, it is disappointing that Glencoe restaurant owners have assumed a rent-seeking stance on outdoor dining operations by requesting further concessions. Instead, they should be expressing appreciation for the special privileges that the village has provided during the pandemic and should voluntarily return parking spaces and sidewalk space beyond their restaurant frontage to the public domain. Number 5, during the depths of the pandemic, when there was reduced competition for downtown parking spaces, it was quite reasonable to create special provisions for struggling downtown restaurants. However, to continue these practices now while harming other downtown businesses would amount to little more than crony capitalism. Glencoe should exercise its option to terminate the leasing agreement. Number 6, as a last resort to preserve downtown parking availability, Glencoe could redesignate many of the parking spaces near Village Hall from authorized parking only to 2-hour parking. The remaining reserved spaces could be restricted to emergency vehicles. Respectfully submitted, J. Schmiel. Our next public comment was submitted through voicemail by property owner Kevin Campbell, and a summary is as follows. Kevin's comment is as follows. Kevin stated that he does not see the need for utilizing parking spaces or public streets for expanded outdoor dining. He stated that new restaurants coming into the community may also seek to use expanded outdoor dining, which would further exacerbate downtown parking spaces, the issues with downtown parking spaces and the number available. Kevin also expressed his opposition to the continuation of temporary carryout parking spaces due to its impact on available parking spaces, but did express his support for continued regular sidewalk seating. And last, our last public comment on this agenda item is from Dr. Joseph Ethan of Lakefront Chiropractic, and his comment is as follows. I am Dr. Ethan of Lakefront Chiropractic. I am affected terribly by the current situation. Valor is directly across the street from me, and Guildhall is just north of me. My patients are coming to me in pain and cannot find a parking space. On top of that, there is no one even in the Valor Street parking area during the day, just empty parking spots that cannot be used. I implore you to end the street dining for restaurants. Thank you, Dr. Ethan. President Rowan, those are the public comments we received on this agenda item.
Thank you. Take a breath. I think what that shows is we have a maybe more complicated issue than we thought. But board members, do you have questions for staff or for the folks from Guildhall, or comments you want to make about this issue, which clearly isn't simple?
I've got a comment, or either.
Jonathan, please go ahead.
Okay, just, valid points on both sides. I just thought I'd make one point where we had our finance committee meeting on Tuesday, and sales tax revenue from the village is as high as it's ever been. And so we're seeing great activity in town, and it can be attributable to, I'm not sure what, but it certainly seems like there's a lot going on in town, and a lot of it seems to be around outdoor dining. So I think the tax side of things has been positive as a result of this.
That's an excellent point. Who else? In theory, we should be able to use the raise your hand at the bottom of the screen. I see Dudley's raising his hand the old-fashioned way. Dudley, go ahead.
The old-fashioned way. Has the Chamber of Commerce weighed in on this one way or another?
Trustee Underdog, Kevin Campbell is the presiding officer of the Chamber of Commerce. However, he did make comment as a property owner, not as a representative of the chamber. I do believe we have a representative from the chamber here this evening, but we have not had specific comment in advance of this evening's meeting.
Thank you.
Anybody else from the board?
Yeah, so I just had one question. So the total number of spaces that have been taken for the outdoor dining is how many? And then the total number of carryout spaces is how many? I'm just trying to get that total number again, correct?
Jordan, do you have that? I mean, we got some information from Guildhall. And of course, there are spaces and spaces, because the spaces that we're talking about are spaces directly on Vernon, directly, next to where the other businesses were saying, "Oh, I want them back." But anyway, what do you have the total number?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Manager Crowley, but we have 16 temporary carryout spaces currently used, and then 9 total parking spaces between Guildhall and Valor at this time.
That's correct.
So the 345 quoted by Guildhall probably includes the train station, we're assuming?
No, it doesn't. It includes the downtown streets and the Village Court parking lot. It does not include the Temple Court lot, which is the B permit parking that Mr. Shapik was referring to, as well as other B permit parking spaces that we have on Park Avenue, Grove Street, and Greenwood.
Okay.
One point to make, we have, as we've talked about, and I think included some information in the memorandum tonight, the curbside parking spaces were instituted at a time where we were seeing a pretty significant amount of curbside pickup, specifically during the day. I think what we've seen and what we've heard from some of our restaurants is that some need them more than others. I think there's a willingness and an openness, particularly during the day, during the daytime hours, to perhaps reduce the total number. I will say, and Mr. Shapik referenced this kind of in the evening hours with curbside pickup, you can tell people that they can't stop in the middle of the street to pick up food that may be carried out from a restaurant that they need to go into a parking space. The designated curbside spots have limited the number of cars that have double and triple parked on Vernon Avenue and Park Avenue. It was a problem. It continues to be a problem at Hometown Coffee, which has a pretty robust curbside pickup program during the day. But I do think there's some need for us to continue to look at the use of those spaces, as well as the consideration of whether, if a business wants to utilize curbside parking spaces, whether there is a licensing fee that goes along with doing so. That is something that we are exploring and want to get a little bit more information on, but that's a way forward as well.
Let me ask something, because one of the public comments, I don't know if this is reasonable. One of the public comments said, okay, the outdoor space is clearly necessary in the evening, but maybe it isn't necessary during the day. Is there any way that some of these spaces and some of the sidewalk space could be sort of reclaimed during the day and then have stuff brought out at night? I don't know if that's reasonable, but I'm asking, since that was one of the comments we had.
I think what we've heard from some of them, and I think particularly if you look at the setup that Guildhall has right now, that's not a reasonable expectation. There are semi-permanent structures in place. I think what we have heard from some of the businesses is that they don't have space to store off-site or within their businesses, their restaurants, to place tables, extra tables and chairs. And what we don't want to create is a secondary problem of tables being stacked or placed where we further block pedestrian access elsewhere. Though I do think there is, some question with something, if something were to be much more mobile, that may be something that we could work out with some of the restaurants. But I do think, to Trustee Vree's point, one of the complex components of this is that the finding a way to maintain the general excitement that is out there with outdoor dining options, and balancing that against the needs of service-based businesses that are finding it to be a struggle to get parking spaces available. But I think last summer we had more spaces taken out of circulation with the parking lot being partially shut down. One of the things that the board talked about with Guildhall and Valor particularly was finding a way to minimize the parking impact on a permanent basis. And so the setups that are in place right now did do that. But certainly as we've emerged from the pandemic, that's why we wanted to have this conversation with you, and certainly get your feedback and thoughts.
Okay, and Kerry Rubin, you've had your hand up.
One of the things that we also might consider in trying to solve for this complex equation is to what extent valet parking stands in several locations downtown perhaps could help not only the restaurants, but also the other business owners that wish to participate. And in that way enable patrons that don't want to walk the block, but they might have to park away, to park much closer to their ultimate location and let their car just get valet parked. That might be something that is more efficient, and also generally help with the issues some folks feel occur with the parking squeeze, both during the day and in the
And that seems like obviously a good idea. I mean, historically, if someone drives to a shopping center, they park and then they get that they have to walk. But when people come to Uptown Glencoe, that's just not the part of the equation, and they get sort of upset if they can't pull up directly in front of the store. And there's, for 50 years, there's never been a solution to that. And I certainly don't have one now, but clearly, and it's interesting, I think valet parking makes sense, but I note that Guildhall wasn't talking about that in their excellent presentation. Anybody else want to weigh in? This strikes, I mean, I know we don't have unlimited time. Although to the extent, it seems to me the hardest question is what about after it gets cold? That is, I think everyone, my sense is that everyone's comfortable with outdoor dining. We need to figure out a way to minimize the harm to others, other businesses particularly, and to make the business district look as good as we can. But I think my sense is that we're pretty comfortable with outdoor dining during the summer. And maybe we need to think about this a little bit more before we decide what to do about the winter.
President Rowan, I would just, oh, sorry, Trustee Listener.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually tend to agree with Jeff Shapak in that we are seeing a change in psychology in the market overall in terms of how people do view outdoor dining. And, if there were a way that we could extend it for another year as some sort of pilot program, I would hate to walk away from something that has been so successful, that is actually very much in line with what we are seeing in a lot of other markets and even in Chicago. So we see that something is working, and the question is, how do we tweak and fix the aspects that aren't working in terms of the availability of parking, and how do we also make this more revenue generating, since there is some feelings that, you know, the restaurants are getting some benefits that they're not paying for. So I mean, I personally would be interested in continuing this program in the cold weather and seeing how that does adapt for another year.
Gail, that's a thoughtful point. I understand it. But I think it continues to be complicated just because, I mean, some of the places where we saw these year-round structures, like maybe they're doing something in Chicago on Randolph Street, that's really not comparable to Glencoe's little business district. There's not a lot of walk-in traffic, or not the same level of walk-in traffic on Randolph Street. So, but I understand the point. I'm just wondering whether are we ready to make that decision today? I don't know.
Just a quick question. So staff, so we did, you know, to Gary's point on valet parking, I think actually valet parking isn't necessarily what's necessary for the restaurants. It's whether we would have valet parking for the chiropractor or some of these other businesses. So, you know, is it a possibility where, you know, we somehow contract with a valet company that valets for the rest of town, not for the restaurants, and whether it's coordinated by the village, or the or Chamber of Commerce, I mean, whatever. But I think that would actually help. Well, we would have to ask the businesses, but if that helped in terms of making, you know, creating the parking area, making it a bigger parking area, because you still don't have to walk very far if that's the main concern, but it opens up all the spaces in the south end of the village, in the train station, because there are open spaces. They're just not necessarily right in front of the stores. So that might be one way to work around this, because I mean, Uptown Glencoe is fun to be in right now. There are a lot of people around. It's more vibrant than, I've been here for 10 years. It's more vibrant than it's ever been. It just, I don't know. It seems like it's something that we do want to try to continue if possible, but we certainly want to take into account all the other businesses. I mean, because we talked about this at the beginning. We don't want to favor restaurants over our other businesses, but we certainly want to help the overall town.
And thank you, Trustee Mulvaney. That's something that we didn't discuss in depth in advance of this evening's conversation, but as Administrative Intern Spangler mentioned, we're certainly undergoing a hard and full look into our parking and what may be options moving forward. And that's certainly something to consider as we look into that further.
And we can certainly explore that with the Chamber of Commerce and others. I think a question that the board also may want to grapple with, and we don't have tonight, but something we'll bring back to you, hardline enforcement versus non-hardline enforcement on parking restrictions. There comes with both pros and cons, and we may want to, as part of our parking discussion in a subsequent month, talk about whether we are going to look at 2-hour parking as absolutes. We are not always, I would say, in a mindset of absolute. If you're there for 2 hours and 1 minute, we're going to give you a parking ticket. Again, that may cause some issues that we don't want to create, but I think it's worth us looking at that and talking to all of you about that as a component as well.
Have we given enough guidance? And I ask this in part because we have some other issues to talk about here.
I guess my question, President Rowan, is there anyone on the board right now that feels as though we need to take action to remove any of the street dining options that are in place? Realizing that if so, there is a 60-day window or a 60-day clock that starts. I think we want to make sure that if you are not interested in doing that now, or you are interested in doing that now, we clarify that point.
So from my point of view, there are good arguments for starting to clear out the village, and there are other arguments for not doing it. For me, the biggest question is winter, and there's no 60-day emergency about winter. So I don't think we need, my view, and I didn't hear anybody else had a different view, is that I don't think we need to do anything to start the 60-day clock. And I think if we do nothing, everything expires at the end of November anyway. I think we will do something. There have been some really good ideas that, and the idea about trying to increase valet, I don't know if that's going to work, because I don't know if people will buy it, but it certainly makes sense. And it could be that if the restaurants are getting the benefit of this, that they pay whatever the fees are to create valet parking for other businesses. But again, I think I don't see a need to start a 60-day clock to start booting people off. I agree with what we've heard from other trustees. The place looks, I mean, I was just down there this afternoon at the farmer's market. The town looks great. It hasn't looked this good ever. But there are these, we don't actually need igloos now. And the people who said they'd like more parking spaces and a little more pedestrian access, they have a point too. But we have time to figure this out. So that's the level of my view. Does anybody want to think we ought to do something else now? And it sounded like Gail, you were ready to say, okay, let's try it for a pilot program for a year. That's that there's certainly a point. Anybody else want to go that far now, or should we think about it for a month or two? Dudley.
Yeah, I'd like to have us get some more information before we make the decision. From my standpoint, I'm concerned about the year-round visual impact of the additional structures in the area. I'm thinking more of the European examples where they have the umbrella tables and that sort of thing that don't have quite the visual impact that the actual year-round structures have. Also, I'd like to see what happens when Writers Theater opens and a number of additional people are using our downtown. So I think we would benefit from the parking study, understanding more about what happens when the theater reopens. I'm okay with extending this for another few months as we look at this down the road. Thank you.
Okay. So we have a couple of other issues. One of them is murals, and that was going to be next, but I don't think we've gotten any public comments on that. Am I right about that?
We have not, and I think we can delay that discussion.
So why don't we? So let's delay that. Okay. We also have the other item for discussion was contractors, and I want to make sure we have enough time to talk about that, because we've gotten some horror stories about contractors, and we need to address that. And so let me ask: have we? The village manager said, okay, if we're going to need to pull the plug within 60 days, we need to do something now. But I don't sense anybody wants to pull the plug right away. Is there any other decision on this that we need to make now, or should we turn to the construction issue? Phil,
if I could I just want to make sure, we know we've got some things to still do and bring back to you. and I'll list off what I have on my list. I want to make sure if there's anything that I'm missing, the board is able to let us know that now. We are going to continue to explore parking and the various different iterations that may exist out there, including the possibility of rearranging some of the duration of parking spaces in the downtown. We are going to review a possibility of how a valet program might work, and perhaps in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce and or the business community. We are going to continue to evaluate if we were to continue an outdoor dining program that utilized the public right-of-way, how we might structure such a thing with appearance review standards, licensing fees, licensing agreements and expectations, and perhaps further tightening up of the current restrictions or lack of restrictions that are in place. Is there anything else that I've missed that someone on the board is hoping when we come back to you in a month or two, we've got ready for you to digest on this?
The only other thing I'd say, let's keep looking to see what others are doing.
Right, absolutely.
Because you know, we don't necessarily have to invent this wheel. We should see what others have done. And I think a big focus is what are we going to do about winter? And I would note, at the end of May, I went to an outdoor roof, and it was cold, and it was, you know, the weather was kind of a problem. And I think it's one thing to have these igloos that are heated and something else to have less formal structures. I'm not, even if that works in San Francisco, I'm not sure that's going to work in Glencoe or Chicago. But anyway, so let's look into that. But I thought your summary is right. Anybody else want to say anything, or are we in a position to move on to contractors?
One additional thing, Phil, if you could just, and I'm not sure you have this, but can you gauge the interest of from the new restaurants in town, what they would be asking for too? Because if we're going to be giving this to others, you know, what if that might be fine, but what if there's Poppy Social wants the same space, and that new place where Coldwell Bank, or that real estate place was on Vernon, also wants 4 spaces, and what does it look like at that point?
Yes, absolutely, we will do so.
And by the way, we have a bunch of folks talking about Poppy Social and how they've written in to say, oh, it's fine if you put it on the village streets on Vernon, but don't put it off the street near me. So, okay.
We will bring that back to you. I'll be in touch and contact with the board. If we think we can have this back to you in time for the July discussion, I will do sooner than later, but we will get back in front of you as quickly as possible.
Okay, then thank you, everybody, on that issue. Let's turn to the construction regulations, and this is residential construction regulations. I know there have been some issues, and Public Works Director David Mao, are you presenting this?
Yeah, Taylor and I will kind of tag team this.
Great. That's great. I'm sorry that we've given you so little time. Do your best.
No. We will. You've got the agenda material. Just a brief summary of that, and then we want to. We're available to answer questions, and I know there's some public comment. As was noted, we have, we have seen an active construction period continue into 2021. I wouldn't say it's at a record pace, but I think it's a different environment with more people home over the last 12 months and more observant. And so we have had a parallel uptick in residential complaints and concerns expressed to the village over a variety of things. So we thought it'd be helpful in the write-up and again tonight just to kind of touch on just a few of the key the key requirements and what the requirement is and what enforcement is in place presently. Then the first is the permitted work hours, which just to review are, and these have been in place for a number of years, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. Saturdays, it's a later start, 9 a.m. till 6 p.m. is permitted, and no work on Sunday or holidays. Work hour violations are enforced by the Public Safety Department based on a combination of call-in complaints to the non-emergency number and the observation of from officers on patrol, and then working in conjunction with the building division of the Public Works Department, we're able to take enforcement action for repeat violators on active construction sites. The second area is permit duration, and dating back in response to the long and lengthy construction activity on a number of large permits back in the early 2000s. In 2005, the village board first adopted an ordinance establishing a 15-month permit duration limit on building permits. And with that, the ordinance included a provision for 6-month permit extensions for an additional third of the original building permit fee. That permit duration process is managed and monitored by the building division staff. And I would say, just as an aside, that's been an effective tool. 95% of our contractors and development sites are finished in that 15-month window. Again, prior to 2005, we didn't have any of those. We didn't have that restriction in place. And the third area is what we call our development and site management plan. That's a plan submittal requirement that was first established in 2004 to address a number of the recurring issues that are many of those same ones that we deal with on a regular basis today. And just in general summary, that plan requires a plan submittal, scaled plan submittal that identifies things such as site and tree protection fencing, equipment and material storage, even details like truck delivery routes, ingress and egressing the site, and contractor employee parking in and around the site. There's a balance there, and so we work very carefully that the range of requirements of that plan are managed and enforced, in partnership with our building and engineering staff, as well as our public safety staff. And so those are kind of three primary elements, and those are probably the core of the complaints and concerns we have expressed. I mean, work hours, dust mitigation, kind of usually lead the complaint list. But then a lot of what we hear from is what falls under that development and site management category, and it's really just general housekeeping and maintenance of these larger permit sites, and not just new single family construction. We have a fair number of significant renovation permits, additions, large additions, pool installations. But obviously the new single family, the redevelopment of a single family parcel is probably the most aggressive impact on neighborhood. And it's magnified if we have multiple sites on a street. And we've gone through periods of time, I would say, corner to corner, east to west, north to south in the village, there's very few streets that have not been impacted in the last 25 years. And some of them will have waves where we'll have 2 or 3 permits in conjunction or right on the heels of each other. And it no doubt creates a building construction fatigue effect on the neighborhood. And we recognize that, we're sensitive to it, but again, under the regulations as presented here, all of these are permitted to proceed, but it puts the onus on village staff, and it's a broad range of staff, to manage those and enforce where we need to enforce. And
one thing I'd add to Director Mao's comments is that we do realize that there is to his point, an enforcement component of these rules and regulations. We are doubling down with public safety and public works in terms of the partnership need for both of those groups of our employees to be very focused on construction and the impacts that construction has on neighborhoods. And that may include the need for both tickets to be written and other actions taken if there are chronic violators. That is an effort that we have employed in the past. We do not have a concern employing in the future. It has been something that we have been able to work very closely with many developers and many contractors. But one of the things we are noticing is, given the kind of pace of construction, meaning there are more people wanting to do more to their homes than perhaps we would see in a regular year or at the same time. We're getting contractors in Glencoe that don't generally work here and may not be as familiar with some of the restrictions that the village has in place. We are working directly with them, pulling them in and having dialogues, very, very pointed discussions about what the expectations of them are if they're working here in Glencoe, and the actions that we may take, which may include anything from a violation notice all the way to a stop work order. And when that happens, it is money out of their pockets that generally speaks volumes to ensure some compliance. So this is a problem, as Dave said. I think Trustee Vree has been living through it on his block for the last 3 or 4 years. Some parts of town are more impacted than others, and it is something that we need to ensure we're doubling down on. I did want to make sure we gave some time for public comments. There were a few. I think we got 3, Jordan. President Rowan, would you like us?
Let's read those, because that'll
Yeah.
frame the issue.
You got it.
Yes, and thank you. I will say I would be remiss in saying that we did not receive any public comments about murals. We did receive one. Village President Rowan, do you mind if I just share that briefly? It was from.
I
Go ahead.
think we're required to, even though hunting the discussion. So yes.
Of course. It is from our property owner, Kevin Campbell again. Kevin, I will go back to my notes. He expressed his opposition to the murals and did not believe that they were appropriate for downtown Glencoe moving forward.
Okay. Make sure he knows that we're going to be talking about this at another time.
I believe Kevin is in attendance. If not, I will certainly let him know. For our public comment for this agenda item, our first comment, the board received the full version of this, and with permission from the commenter, we have an abbreviated version this evening. This is from Mike and Sarah Richmond at 455 Sheridan Road. And their comment is as follows. We were shocked when we returned from out of town to find part of our fence torn down without notification, with scraps of timber remaining. In its place is a huge black plate of metal fence surrounding our property to the east and south. The finished side of the black plates face the property of the neighbor who installed it. The back side of this new fence faces our property. It is a terrible eyesore. It creates a dark, ominous, closed-in feeling and is not in conformity with other homes in the village. Forgive me, I'm just making sure. Sections of the fence violate village code exceeding 6 feet 10 inches plus the fence post. Village code limits fences to 6 feet and states that the smoother finished side of the fence faces the adjoining property. The fence plating is flipped so that the better side of the fence faces inward as opposed to our side. This is compounded by the fact that they also completely tore down a portion of our fence that was clearly located on our property, as evidenced by the survey, which we provided to the village. This has caused us to incur the significant expense of dog proofing to keep our dog inside our yard and other animals out. We are facing the further expense of a more permanent solution. I contacted the village and for advice and help. After an inspection, I was informed that the variances are arguable and that there's essentially nothing the village can do to help. There is nothing arguable about these measurements and the destruction of our property. The village code creates a duty upon the village to notify a property owner of a non-conforming fence and ultimately an obligation upon the village to demolish it. This is all further complicated by ongoing welding of the neighbor's metal fence, sending sparks into our yard by our gas-operated pool equipment and where our young grandchildren were playing. This has happened while I was home. I asked the worker to stop. He essentially ignored me and continued, some of which I captured on video. The village has not provided any constructive assistance, much less followed the letter of the law, and we feel abandoned. We feel that the village sides with the bigger house that is owned by someone I am told is developing other properties in the village or simply does not care about the average homeowner. And again, the board received the full comment this evening. Our next comment is from Gail Cluin at 417 Lakeside Terrace, and Gail's comment is as follows. To the members of the Committee of the Whole, we live at 417 Lakeside Terrace. Construction next door at 411 Lakeside Terrace has been ongoing for approximately 3 years. Construction at the site next to 411 at 395 Lakeside Terrace has been going on for at least 5 years, if not longer. I understand that the village assesses additional fees on construction projects that aren't completed within a certain number of months. I also understand that as long as work continues and the fees continue to be paid, there is nothing the village can do to make someone finish their project. While the owners of 411 and 395 do not appear to be deterred by the ongoing fees, and while the village benefits from those ongoing fees, who bears the brunt of construction? We do. Our property taxes have tripled since we moved into our house in 1997, yet the quality of life that our house and neighborhood provides has deteriorated over the past several years. Does the village not have a duty to its tax-paying citizens? I'm writing to ask that you consider the situation from the perspective of the neighboring properties that are negatively impacted by prolonged construction. I ask that you think about how you would feel if 1, the street you live on had ongoing construction for many years, 2, the house next to you was under construction for 3 years with no end in sight, and 3, you are considering selling your house but you can't because you know that any offers that you may receive will be negatively impacted by ongoing construction. I ask you to picture yourself in our yard and then envision semi-trucks, dumpster deliveries, ongoing construction noise, and an unsightly mess all around you, or you're working from home for 15 months and can't often hear yourself think. As village leaders, please consider this situation and discuss what can be done for homeowners, such as ourselves, that are so negatively impacted by it. I don't know the answer, I just know that it's a problem in need of a solution. I respectfully request that you take up this subject and find a solution for property owners such as ourselves. Thank you. Sincerely, Gail Cluin. And our last public comment on this item is from Joe Keefe, who lives at 411 Randolph Street. And Joe's comment is as follows. Ordinances relating to residential construction in the RC district contain conflicts which obviate the purpose of the defined setback. These conflicts permit construction within the setback in an area where land use is, by zoning definition, significantly restricted. The conflicts contained in the ordinance make it impossible for one homeowner to protect property from another. On the enforcement side, through intensely challenging personal experiences, my family has been subject to next door construction practices which have violated ordinances dozens of times in the past 14 months. Innumerable calls to public works and police have done virtually nothing to change the relentless violations from continuing to occur. A question arises. How is a business able to operate in Glencoe while continuing to repeatedly violate ordinances? In our case, warnings, fines, even work stoppages did not diminish recurrences of ordinance violations. While I appreciate the opportunity to present concerns to the village, the innumerable issues relating to residential construction cannot be addressed in 400 words or less. In any case, thank you for your consideration. And that was Joe's comment. President Rowan, those were all of the public comments we received for this evening's meeting.
So we have, if we're to adhere to our protocol, a minute and a half to deal with this. So these are serious points that need to be addressed seriously. I don't know what the facts are. I haven't had a chance to look into it. I don't know the extent to which the village has looked into it. But I guess let me just say, from my point of view, we want to help. We want people to be able to do construction in this town, but we also want to help our residents so they're not tortured when construction is done. You know, I think it would be useful to maybe more fully investigate these issues and see if they result in us giving us some ideas for either tweaking ordinances or tweaking the way we enforce, or maybe just trying to make sure our residents understand that we're doing as much as we can. Because I would be I don't know what the facts are, but I'd be mad if I were any of the residents writing in. I would.
We certainly can come back to you. We did talk a bit about this when we redid the village's building permit fee structure a few years back, and it probably is worthwhile dusting some of that information off and taking another look at some things. We can also get some survey information. There are some things that some of our neighboring communities have done over the years that are both helpful and possibly hurtful. So we certainly can bring some information back to you. I think I'll just underscore what I said before, that, you know, we do understand the responsibility to enforce the village's construction work rules and ordinances. I think in some of these circumstances, it isn't so much an issue of the village not being in an active enforcement role, but perhaps not being able to do what the neighboring homeowners would like us to do. And so I do think it's probably worth us bringing some information back to you in terms of how we compare and how we might perhaps adjust some things on a going forward basis.
Okay, all that makes sense. And Dudley, for just a second, I'm willing to look into this just to see if, to see whether there's anything we can do for these residents. So I'll talk with staff about whether there's more information. I would have thought that if a fence is either 6 feet or less or isn't. And so, but maybe it's more complicated than that.
It's more complicated than that.
Right. Well, like I said, but when I was busy trying to enforce the village's fence rules to the hilt, I thought it was straightforward, and I'm sorry to hear that it isn't.
I don't think it's the rules. I think it's the fencing.
Oh, no, I understand. So Dudley has his hand up. So be brief, because we've sort of run out of time and we have a couple other things before we start our regular meeting.
Do the best I can. Just wanted to look at this a little bit from legal dimensions. What is that world of parameters that we have to work in? Also, the folks up in Lake Forest have dealt with this issue and encouraged staff to take a look at what they do. Thank you.
That's helpful. Thank you. Anybody else want to say anything about the construction issue, which also seems serious, though, but we're going to get more information on what we can do about it?
One quick thing. I think a lot of from my understanding, a lot of the regulations are based on each property. One of the problems is a single contractor across town. And so forcing, having a problem on one property needs to affect other properties if it's the same contractor.
I raised that, and we should talk to our legal counsel, who just appeared film here about what we can do if we have someone that we think is a bad actor, and whether yes, absolutely. Let's figure out what we can do and then set about doing it and hope we never have to. But I think that's a good point. Is there anybody else that wants to say anything about construction regulations? If not, I don't see anybody else. If not, the next item is whether there is any other business that anyone would like to discuss in this committee of the whole meeting. I don't see anybody. With that, okay, then the next item is whether there have been any public comments since the meeting started. Jordan, have we gotten any public comments that we need to read now?
No, President Rowan, not for this meeting.
Excellent. Okay. Is there then a motion to adjourn, since we have pretty much run into our next meeting? Is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Village Manager Crowley, could you read the roll?
Trustee Hallwax,
Yes.
trustee Listener,
Yes.
trustee Onderdonk,
Yes.
trustee Rubin,
Yes.
trustee Vree.
Yes.
We're adjourned.
Thank you very much, everybody, but get ready for meeting 2. And it is after 7. So I'm going to start while everybody is, everybody is welcome to, we're going to stay. Are we still recording? We ready to go?
You're ready to go.
All right. So if somebody needs to take a break or something, I'm going to read the required language for a Zoom meeting while everybody, gets ready. Pursuant to recently adopted amendments to the Illinois Open Meetings Act included in Public Act 101-0640, public bodies may, in certain circumstances, hold entirely virtual public meetings without a quorum physically present in any one location. Under authority granted to me on May 20, 2021, I issued a declaration of emergency to address the health threat posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Also on May 20, 2021, I executed written determination that given the ongoing emergency associated with the COVID-19 pandemic, in-person meetings of the Board of Trustees are not practical or prudent. On May 28, 2021, Governor Pritzker issued his most recent disaster proclamation and Executive Order 2021-11 that declared in-person attendance at public meetings of more than 10 people at the regular public meeting location to be infeasible in accordance with the Open Meetings Act as amended by Public Act 101-0640. In accordance with the above actions, I've also determined that in-person meetings of the Board of Trustees are not practical or prudent at this time and until further notice. As I said at a prior meeting, I think this is likely to be it, and I'm hopeful that our next meeting will be in person. The village board meeting is being conducted virtually with members participating through the Zoom webinar platform. The village manager is in Village Hall, council chambers as required by the Open Meetings Act. So with that said, I'd like to call the meeting to order and request a roll call of who's here. And Mr. Crowley, could you take the roll?
Certainly. Trustee Hallwax,
Here.
trustee Listener,
Here.
trustee Mulvaney, trustee Onderdonk. Oh, trustee Onderdonk.
Here. Can you hear me?
We can now. Trustee Rubin, who is signed on, but may have stepped away from his computer. Trustee Vree.
Here.
We have a quorum.
That's great. Okay, and I'll read some. A quorum of members of the board are present via remote access. In accordance with the law, I'll ask for roll call rather than voice votes on any agenda item requiring a vote. The first item, and we can do this while we're waiting for Trustee Rubin is a consideration of the minutes. The minutes for the prior village board meeting were circulated. And if anybody has any comments concerning or suggestions for the minutes, please speak up. And otherwise, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, let's have a roll call.
And just for the record, Trustee Rubin has joined the meeting, so we will mark him as present.
That's great.
Roll call, Trustee Hallwax,
Yes.
Trustee Listener,
Yes.
Trustee Underdunk,
Yes.
Trustee Rubin,
Yes.
Trustee Vree.
Yes.
Pardon the cat. The motion carries. Okay, the minutes. The next item is public comment. In accordance with the supplemental rule of the board approved on April 16th, 2020, here's how public comment will be taken at this meeting. The email address and telephone number designated for public comment for this meeting were published with the meeting agenda. And Jordan Lester, could you read the public comments that were received on non-agenda items that were submitted prior to the meeting, and public comments on agenda items, if any, will be read when we reach that item on the agenda.
President Rowan, we do have some public comment and non-agenda items. Our first public comment is from Andrew Rice. Andrew's comment is as follows. Hi all, I'm emailing today to express my deep concern regarding the proposed plans for the development of the back patio at 668 Vernon Avenue, aka Poppy's Social. I currently reside with my mom at 672 Vernon Avenue, and the construction of the interior alone has been a major disruption to our day-to-day lives as we both work from home. I could not imagine living next to a back patio that is proposed to seat over 80 people until 11:30 p.m. on a regular night. My mom and I do not believe this proposal aligns with the calm, yet active community that has been fostered in downtown Glencoe. We are thrilled to see another restaurant in the community, but it should not come at the expense of all the adjacent neighbors, including numerous individuals who work from home and families with little children. If we wanted a more festive living environment with live music and drinking, we would live in Chicago, but the reality is that we live in Glencoe. Ultimately, we would hope the Zoning Commission takes action to rezone the back lot of 668 Vernon Avenue and ensure that Poppy's Social does not build a back patio for diners. Thank you for your consideration. He also notes, it is my understanding that the back patio proposal has been shelved for the time being, but I hope that the village board will agree with me in saying that an open air patio with live music and games seating upwards of 80 people is not acceptable now or a year down the road. Best regards, Andrew Rice. Our next comment is from resident David Elzy at 373 Hazel Avenue, and David's comment is as follows. Dear Board of Trustees, I and local homeowners are very concerned about the Glencoe charm and quality of life being threatened by the proposed outdoor dining, beer garden-like patio of the new restaurant Poppy's Social, 30 feet from bedrooms, living rooms, and backyards of residences on all three sides. I have homeowner friends along Greenwood whose newly bought home property abut the proposed patio. Their quality of life can change, as can the value of their investment in their homes, against Glencoe's expressed intention to keep values as high as possible. There are concerned residences also in the townhouses 30 feet across the north alley of the patio. I live in the south apartment property adjacent to the patio. My bedroom is literally feet from this potential dining area, as are others. Note, the downtown plan, page 11 says, quote, protect the value and desirability of surrounding uses. The activities within downtown must be careful to respect the edges, the transitions between downtown and the surrounding residential neighborhoods, unquote. I hope you take the time to consider the precedent you'd be setting if you allowed this noise to intrude into the surrounding neighborhood, affecting so many Glencoe residents' lives. Respectfully, David Elzy. And our last public, oh, forgive me, our next public comment is from resident Peter Downey, and Peter's comment is as follows. Good evening. I understand that the subject of Poppy Social is not on the agenda tonight and won't be discussed, but as a property owner on Greenwood Avenue, I just want to ensure that the potential use of the rear patio at the rear of 668 Vernon remains in the minds of the trustees. Please consider that the current plan is for an 84-person entertainment space, including late night dining to 11 p.m., competitive games, and 6 live music events per year. Considering how close the patio is to neighbors, noise alone makes this an inappropriate use of space. Also, why is there any need for late night use of the patio? I'm assuming people could be seated outside at the front like all other restaurants. Even before the restaurant has been opened, there have been reported construction noise violations, and this makes me fearful for our future. We need to be able to relax after work. Many people on the street have young children that need to go to sleep early in preparation for school. Also, please consider the effect on parking an 84 capacity patio will have. Maybe the restaurant owner should use this space for staff parking. Thank you for listening to my concerns. Regards, Peter Downey. And our last comment of the evening is from Nicole Downing, and Nicole's comments are as follows. Thank you for taking my comments this evening. I'm an owner on the 600 block of Greenwood. I'm writing into this meeting to express concerns about a back patio that is under development for Poppy Social at 668 Vernon Avenue. While the patio is not on the agenda for this evening, it is my understanding that it will come up for liquor license review shortly. The back patio sits directly against residences on all 3 sides, with outdoor diners eating, drinking alcohol, and playing music practically in my backyard. The development of the patio as a restaurant space stands to cause extreme distress and nuisance to my home as well as the entire block. The restaurant owners previously quoted an outdoor capacity of 84 guests, plus close to 170 indoor dining guests. A restaurant of this size will also require a sizable staff to service the customers. In addition to the obvious and concerning risk of noise pollution, I'm also concerned about parking and traffic congestion, as close to 300 diners and staff try to find parking spaces in our small downtown. Living on Greenwood, I am lucky that I can walk into town. However, there's street parking running the full western side of our street and along Hazel. There's hardly ever an open parking space now. While sitting on my porch, I often see cars circle the block to locate an open spot. The parking situation already causes congestion and pollution on the street that will only worsen when the restaurant opens. I would like to suggest that when Poppy Social comes up for your review, you require that the back patio space be used for staff parking or valet. Not only would this alleviate parking congestion, it would also lighten the restaurant capacity, thereby reducing the number of people searching for spots at any one time. Please require the restaurant to seat outdoor diners on the sidewalk at the front like all the other restaurants in town. Thank you, Nicole Downey. President Rowan, those were the public comments that we received for this village board meeting.
For the non-agenda items,
Uh,
thank you.
Correct.
If a member of the public would like to submit a public comment during the meeting, please email your comment to glencoemeeting@villageofglencoe.org. And comments submitted during the meeting may be read at the end of the meeting. Your comments need to be 400 words or less, or we may not read the comments. Okay. Is Trustee Mulvaney here?
He's not, President Rowan, so.
Okay, so we had a culture of caring moment. We're going to pass that and go directly to the reports of committees. And the first report of the committee is the Committee of the Whole, which I'm going to report. We just finished that meeting a few minutes ago. The Cliff Notes version of that meeting is that we had a lengthy discussion about what to do about the fact that in the business district, we made a number of accommodations during the pandemic to restaurants using parking spaces and sidewalk spaces for outdoor dining and for igloo dining. And the question is what to do going forward. And that is going to, the village staff is following up on that. And in addition, we've heard from some of the restaurants and the other businesses, and we're going to follow up on that and try to do something sensible. We had intended to discuss murals, but there was very little commentary and we ran out of time. So we're going to punt murals to a subsequent meeting. And then we had a brief discussion about residential construction regulations. A number of residents wrote in with horror stories, and we're going to follow up with what we can do to help protect our residents, which may include either further enforcement or tweaking our ordinances, as one of our former trustees suggested in a letter. Let me go back and just say one of the things that we talked about in dealing with outdoor dining is the possibility of expanded valet parking for not just restaurants, but other businesses. That's the report for the Committee of the Whole. The next item we have is a report of the Finance Committee. Trustee Vree, I think there was a meeting, and if you would report briefly on that.
Thank you. So we had a meeting on Tuesday, and it was generally a very positive meeting. So village finances are in surprisingly very good shape. I shouldn't say surprisingly, but going into 2021, I think all of us were pretty nervous about some sort of hangover from COVID and how it might affect the village finances this year. And so far, things are very good. Really, the general fund is coming in well above plan. Much of that is a result of some of the things we talked about in the Committee of the Whole, where construction permits are up significantly. Sales tax is up significantly within the village. And generally speaking, village finances are in very good shape. We also reviewed the comprehensive annual financial report, which is our audit. There were a few things that came up, but generally everything was very good. We did our monthly review of the community investment program. I think there are two Bobcats to be bought, but really just the normal review of our plan. And then we also went over the amount to put into the pension plans. And another positive point of the Finance Committee, we had good returns on the pension plans last year. So what we budgeted was actually a little bit higher than what our auditor or what our financial advisor proposed we should put into the plan. But what we've been talking about is how do we shore up the pension plans and our underfunding position. And so we've discussed ways to help that this year, in a year where finances were very good. And then finally, the last thing we discussed was, so we originally put off cost of living increases for 6 months for non-union employees in the village. And the idea being that we all thought this would be a really tough year. And while things could still derail and go wrong from here on out, our view is that's probably not the case, and that 6 month freeze should be undone. And so we want to go back and retroactively give the non-union village employees a cost of living increase. What we had proposed and what we originally budgeted was a 6 month increase. We want to go back and do a 12-month increase, which we originally budgeted about $60,000. The change would make that about $100,000 increase. And so the Village Finance Committee thought that was a good idea.
Thank you. And I do want to give Trustee Gary Rubens credit for getting that on the agenda of the Finance Committee. I think it's the right thing to do. And there's going to be a little more later in the meeting from our finance director about the actual cost of the retroactive increase. That's great. Okay, the next report is Plan Commission. Trustee Gail Listener, tell us what happened at the Plan Commission.
Sure. So we met on May 26th. We had 3 items on our agenda. They were all exterior appearance reviews. The first one was for 320 Tudor Court, which is the Compass Real Estate office that's occupying part of the Harris Bank building. And we basically approved their new awning and signage for that office. There was also an exterior appearance review for 339 Park Avenue, where they were also proposing new awning, sign, and window signage for the new tenant, Hudson Grace. This is the space that used to be occupied by Denim and Soul. It was approved. Hudson Grace is kind of a boutique home decor store that's owned by Crate and Barrel. And they will be opening in that space. And our third exterior appearance review was for 668 Poppy Social Restaurant. The only thing that we were considering was the screens for the rooftop mechanical equipment. And then that was also reviewed and approved. So that kind of wraps up what we did at our meeting.
Thank you for that excellent pithy report. The next report is the Golf Advisory Committee. Trustee Hallwex.
Yeah, similar to Trustee Vree's report of positive news, I'll keep this short, and it's a continuing theme of good news or good from the golf course. In May, we had a new record of 6,130 rounds, and to put it in perspective, that's 1,500 over the previous record set 14 years ago. There were no rainouts, and between the weather and the post-COVID desire to be outside, the golf has gotten a boost, and we are certainly enjoying that. There's something I'd certainly like to get on the record for everybody, that the Centennial Golf Outings planned for August 13th. It is a Roaring 20s themed event with a dinner afterwards. So the details are on the Glencoe Golf website. Also on the website is the Friends of the Glencoe Golf Club fundraising page. So now that we can officially send people to the website and the links with the fundraising efforts. So the Friends of the Glencoe Golf Club, we met on Monday. I actually was unable to attend, but from that I can report that Phil and Nikki were able to attend and discuss the municipal financing and referendums with the board. And we had Scott Shore and Lynn Goldschmidt joined the Friends Clubhouse Project Advisory Committee, which is great. And we are still searching for a handful more of Friends board members. On the Centennial Golf Outing, we're looking for, obviously foursomes to show up. If the board could consider, we'd certainly appreciate that. And we're also selling whole sponsorships for $250, which will be proceeds going to the Friends fundraising efforts. Right now, there's roughly just over $13,000 that has been raised. So good news from us, and with the next committee meeting is this coming Monday.
Thanks for that excellent report. The next report is the Sustainability Task Force, excuse me. That was going to be Trustee Mulvaney. Do we have a staff member who attended that meeting?
Megan Olson is present at the meeting this evening. Megan, can you do a quick update?
Sure, no problem. Good evening, members of the board, President Rowan. I'll keep this brief. The Sustainability Task Force met last month. They welcomed some new members. They continue to discuss educational campaigns through the use of their blog, as well as the partnerships that they have with the Glencoe Public Library and their webinars. We're also discussing possible ways to reduce idling within the village, so vehicle idling. And you might see something about that more next month. Are there any questions?
Megan, that was great. Thank you. Okay, the next report is on the Community Relations Forum, and I think Gary Rubin is our representative on that. Gary, take it away.
We had a meeting, also welcomed some new members, but spent the vast bulk of the meeting continuing our discussion about the ordinance, the community relations ordinance here in the village, and how that might be revised, updated, and we will be coming back to this group when we finish doing that, which will hopefully be the next meeting that we have, but we will see. We've made a lot of progress. I will also note that since our last meeting, we have published another article, which you can go on the website and take a look at, which is a very well done article. I say that because I had nothing to do with the writing of it, about one of the folks who works here in Glencoe for many years and interacts with many, many of our residents. It's under our Getting to Know the Heart of Glencoe series. So I would advise that you read that. It'll take you a few minutes, and I really think you'll enjoy it.
Thank you, Trustee Rubin. So the last report is the Historic Preservation Commission. Dudley Underdunk is our representative on that. And Dudley, what's your brief report?
Okay, on Tuesday, June 8th, the Historic Preservation Commission held an advisory review for proposed facade modifications on an honorary landmark home located at 612 Washington Avenue, a 1930s French country style home. In addition, the commission continued its ongoing discussion of the village's historic preservation ordinance and intend to present information to the village board at an upcoming committee of the whole and get feedback from that. They have done a pretty extensive survey of other North Shore communities, and they want to share that information. Lastly, there will be a recognition ceremony for St. Paul AME Church in August in celebration of the board's adoption of the church as a certified landmark during the May board meeting. Thank you very much.
Thanks for that excellent report. I think that takes care of our reports of committees. So the next item on the agenda is the reports of the officers. And the first one is the village manager's report. Village Manager Corrali, take it away.
President Rowan, thank you so much, and good evening, everyone. My report is relatively brief this evening. The first item is a presentation by I should say on our consent agenda tonight is the acceptance of the village's comprehensive annual financial report for the stub year, which is our last fiscal year, which ended December 31st. I'm pleased to introduce Jamie Wilkie this evening. She is a partner at the village's auditing firm of Lauterbach and Amon. She is going to present the report to the board and answer any questions that you may have. And I'm going to hand it off to you, Jamie.
Thank you, Phil. Good evening. Can you all hear me okay? Great.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us this evening. As mentioned, the comprehensive annual financial report was presented earlier this week to the Finance Committee. So we'll keep tonight's presentation brief, but certainly I will open it up for any questions at the end that the trustees may have. I'd like to start the meeting by certainly thanking Nikki Larson and the rest of the finance team. As you can imagine, it's been quite a year going through a stub year, a pandemic, and a software conversion. So to have all of those happen in the same fiscal year while you have an audit going on as well is certainly no easy task. Nikki and her team really prepared an excellent audit package. So I certainly want to thank them for all of their efforts this evening. So thank you, Nikki. I do want to point out within the larger bound comprehensive annual financial report, any of you that have that in front of you this evening, I will provide just a couple of page number references as we walk through the report. The village received what we call the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. This is an award program that is run by the Government Finance Officers Association, and in our industry is really deemed the highest level financial reporting that any government entity can have. There is about 1.5 inch thick checklist that we go through with staff on an annual basis, certainly making sure that the village's finances and the display of the finances meets that criteria. So page 7 of the document will provide a copy of last year's award. We will again be submitting this year's audit to the program, obviously anticipating receipt of the award again for this fiscal year. The audit opinion itself is provided on pages 8 and 9 of the larger document. As I said, we had a clean audit process, and that is indicated by a clean or unmodified audit opinion. When we come in to do our test work, we're really looking to satisfy two goals within that audit opinion. Number one, to ensure that the financial statements are in fact materially correct. And number two, to do an overall assessment of the internal control environment. So while we are not required to actually provide an opinion on the village's internal controls, as part of our testing, we are required to look at the overall control environment. Certainly, if there were any red flags, findings, areas of concern, we would have to bring those forth this evening. And I'm happy to report we had no internal control findings. So truly a clean audit process. One of the most important sections of the document is provided on pages 10 through 23, which covers what we call management's discussion and analysis. That really does serve as the executive summary to the report. It is a rather large document. There are a lot of numbers, a lot of disclosures. This section of the report really is provided as a means to have that executive summary and overview of the results for the fiscal year. I just want to point out a couple of items, and I think a few of them have already been discussed this evening through some of the committee reports. The overall impact from the COVID-19 pandemic was probably not quite as severe as many of our communities had anticipated at the start of all of this. So the general fund was able to end the year with a surplus of about $2.3 million. The water fund also had good results for the fiscal year. Really from the dry summer and the implementation of new meters during the year. That increase was about $1.2 million as of December 31st. And as we heard, golf has made a bit of a resurgence through the pandemic. And so we definitely saw that in the results for the fiscal year as well. The golf fund had an overall increase in equity of about $500,000. So certainly some further discussion within that section of the report. I do want to point out this is a stub year for the village, so a lot of those comparisons become a little more difficult within that discussion. But I think Nikki and Phil and the rest of the staff really did a nice job highlighting some of those key transactions and results for the fiscal year. The last section of the report I want to point out is on pages 127 through 157, and it encompasses what we call our statistical section. I know many of our board members are always interested in being able to access historical information for the village, and this section of the document will in fact provide that. There is a wealth of information covering financial results for the last 10 fiscal years, information on property taxes, long-term debt, as well as operating indicators. So certainly I wanted to make sure the board was aware of that section of the report as well. Certainly happy to answer any questions this evening. Again, I just want to reiterate a clean audit opinion and clean audit process, and happy to answer any questions.
If there are none, we will, as I mentioned at the beginning of my report, this is going to be a vote on the consent agenda for acceptance this evening. I want to add my thanks to Jamie and her team for always providing such professional service and care to the village as we go through this process. It wasn't easy for you guys either, having to do essentially remote audit, but definitely a lot of good work done on your side, and to underscore my thanks to Nikki Larson and her team for being the other side of that remote audit and getting all of the work done that needed to be done amidst everything else that was happening in 2020 and 2021. So thank you to Jamie for being here this evening and presenting that. As I mentioned, it'll be on the agenda in a few minutes for your acceptance.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks. Howard, you are muted.
There we go. Okay, sorry. I just want to say 30 seconds. Jamie, that was a great, straightforward report. And I just want to say, I noticed the part where you said that our finance team got another gold star. And I just want to say that's great. Because it wasn't always so. So thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jamie. I'll continue with my report. I wanted to circle back to an item that both Trustee Vree and President Rowan brought up, and that was a conversation that we had on Tuesday night at the Finance Committee meeting as it relates to cost of living adjustments for non-union employees. Finance Director Larson did go back and confirm that the total impact to the village's budget is approximately $40,000 over what was budgeted or what was included in the budget. If the board concurs with that, we would propose to bring back a budget amendment later on in the fiscal year that would accommodate that change, as well as other budgetary changes that may take place during the course of the year, and then accommodate a retroactive pay for non-union employees. It's about 30% of our workforce. That would retro back to January 1st of 2021. I've seen some nodding heads around on Zoom. I just want to make sure that there's affirmation from everybody, and if so, we will move forward with that. Seeing no no's, we will progress, and thank you for that. I wanted to just make mention of the fact that we are almost at the 4th of July. It's hard to believe that half of June is over, but I'm pleased and excited to report that the 4th of July in Glencoe this year will feel a bit more normal than it did last year. There is quite a bit of information that has started to go out to the community. Residents received a postcard in the mail this week from the Park District, and the village has been sharing information in e-news and on social media over the last several weeks outlining the plans for the 4th. I think one point to make, and unfortunately there was a difficult decision that had to be made this spring before the state lifted its COVID mitigation requirements that required us to reschedule our 4th of July fireworks to Labor Day weekend. Those fireworks will be held on Friday, September 3rd, and there will be live entertainment at Lakefront Park, and it'll be an opportunity to celebrate, even though it's not our traditional time to celebrate with fireworks. But that was a requirement of our contract with our service provider. And that's a partnership with the Park District on that. And so we did talk about that earlier this year, but I wanted to make sure to make mention of it again. But have no fear, there are still fun things to do on the 4th of July, including the traditional Rotary Fun Run. Our Park District is doing some great kids and family games running from 9 to 1 p.m. at Caulk Park. And we hope people will go out and enjoy those. And something we're very excited about, we are going to have a parade this year. We have taken on the work of getting a parade pulled together with not a whole lot of time, but don't let that fool you. It's still going to be a lot of fun. We do encourage the community, and we are sharing information in e-news tomorrow, as well as have been sharing information with our business community, our service organizations, our civic organizations, and our other governmental entities, encouraging people to sign up and participate in the parade. We will have live music in the parade. We will have the Jesse White Tumblers joining us again. And we hope, as the old saying goes, if you're not watching the parade, you're walking in it. Here in Glencoe, we will revert back to the pre-sesquicentennial parade route, which will finish up at Village Hall instead of at Lakefront Park. But it will be a really fun day, and something that, again, hopefully will make us feel like the 4th of July pre-2020. So lots more information on the village's website, and encourage people to go to that or to the Park District's website. And if you want to sign up for the parade, you can look for that information on social media, on the website, and in tomorrow's e-news on June 18th. Last thing I wanted to make mention of, I had reported on this a few months ago at the village board meeting that we had been approached about the possibility of a large-scale concert event in downtown Glencoe over Labor Day weekend. I'm pleased to report that next week, this event will be formally announced by the event coordinator, and that it'll take place on Saturday, September 4th from approximately 5 p.m. till approximately 10:30 p.m. Those times are still being tied down. It's going to be in the Temple Court parking lot. And again, this is the Saturday of Labor Day weekend. The village is sending out neighbor notifications, and those have been mailed so that anyone within 500 feet of the concert site is going to be made aware of it. And more information is coming out next week, including ticket prices as well as advanced ticket sale information for Glencoe residents only. We have been advised by the event planner that 100% of all ticket sale revenue is going to be donated back to District 35's parent-teacher organization, and so those resources will stay here in Glencoe. So more information coming out next week. We're excited about this. It's a neat opportunity and something, again, for the community to be able to come together and enjoy after a year of not being able to do a whole lot. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that the trustees may have. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Village Manager Crowley, for that excellent report. The next item is the Village President's report, and the first item in that is consideration of an extension of the Village President's Declaration of Emergency. The current declaration is set to expire at the end of tonight's meeting, and I'm recommending that we extend the declaration. The governor's emergency declaration is extended to the end of the month. We all hope that when it ends, we're also going to go to fully, in-person meetings. But in the interim, I think we should extend this. And I would note that we've heard from our council that an attempt to do hybrid meetings where there's a public meeting, but people who are nervous and unvaccinated would try to connect virtually, that those have been kind of a disaster. So my recommendation is that we extend the emergency declaration to the next meeting. And I'd request, unless anyone wants to talk about that, I'd request a motion to approve that.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And President Roan, I'm sorry, just technically, it's to the adjournment of the next regular special meeting of the village board.
Okay, that's fine. Although, Steve, can we have a public meeting if we want to?
I'm sure I don't understand your question.
I'm sorry, could we have a non-Zoom meeting at the next village board meeting?
Yes, this emergency declaration is separate and apart from your finding that in-person meetings are not practical or prudent. That is entirely up to you as the village president. So the answer is yes, you can have a completely in-person meeting, even though this emergency declaration will extend to the end of that meeting. The answer is yes.
Okay, that's great. That's helpful. Explains why we're doing what we're doing. We have a motion and a second, so let's have a roll call.
Trustee Hallwax.
Yes.
Trustee Listener.
Yes.
Trustee Onderdonk.
Yes.
Trustee Rubin.
Yes.
Yes.
Trustee Vree.
Yes.
The motion carries. All right, the next item is consideration of a resolution honoring former trustee Barbara Miller. Is Barbara on Zoom somewhere?
Yeah, Jordan is adding her to the panelist list.
Okay, because we're about to talk about her.
Yes, I'm
Trustee,
here.
yep.
So what I'd like to do is read a resolution that your former cohorts have put together about your excellent service. It's a resolution honoring Barbara Miller, and it reads as follows. Whereas Barbara Miller was elected as a trustee of the Village of Glencoe in May 2013, re-elected in 2017, and served with distinction as a member of the Board of Trustees until 2021. And whereas Barbara Miller has served as vice chair and village board liaison to the Plan Commission since her election to the village board in 2013, and as a member of the Finance Committee since 2017. And whereas Barbara Miller also served on the Zoning Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals, Fence Board of Appeals from June 2007 to May 2013, and as chair from August 2009 to May 2013. And whereas Barbara Miller also served as a member of the village's Home Rule Task Force from 2005 to 2006, and whereas Barbara Miller, through her role as a trustee, contributed significantly to the development of 2 village strategic plans, setting goals and initiatives that will guide future boards and staff in retaining Glencoe's attractiveness while being mindful of necessary changes and future opportunities. And whereas Barbara Miller, as trustee, sought to ensure that all who lived in, worked in, and visited our community were heard, welcomed, engaged, and made to feel at home in Glencoe through the village's adoption of the Welcoming and Inclusive Community Pledge. And whereas Barbara Miller, through her role on the Finance Committee, provided productive, focused, and thoughtful insights to preserve and uphold the village's historically strong financial position, helped to improve the village's reserve fund balances while maintaining its coveted AAA rating from Standard & Poor's. And whereas Barbara Miller, through her role as a Plan Commission vice chair, played an integral role in numerous comprehensive village planning projects, such as the development of the village's downtown plan and Tudor Court streetscape improvements. And whereas Barbara Miller also, through her role as Plan Commission vice chair, worked tirelessly through the Forest Edge subdivision development process to ensure that all voices were heard in order to arrive at the best possible outcome. And whereas Barbara Miller, also in her capacity as Plan Commission vice chair, guided the successful partnership that resulted in the construction of the new Writers Theater, the world-renowned cultural and architectural marvel, now permanently at home on Tudor Court. And whereas Barbara Miller, through her leadership as Zoning Commission chair and commissioner, displayed a high level of civic responsibility by conducting public hearings, making recommendations to the village board with respect to zoning code amendments, and considering special use permits. And whereas Barbara Miller, also through her role as Zoning Commission chair and commissioner, actively participated on commission deliberations on a variety of matters, including commercial uses at the Glencoe train station, political signage, relaxing the restrictions on emergency generators, arbors, and pergolas on residential properties, and recommending amendments to the zoning code related to ground floor uses in the business district. And whereas Barbara Miller has consistently served the best interests of the village of Glencoe and its residents through detailed, inclusive, objective, and deliberate evaluation of issues in her numerous roles in her furtherance of her commitment to maintaining the quality of life in Glencoe. And whereas Barbara Miller gave unselfishly of her time for over 15 years and fulfilled her responsibilities to her fellow citizens in a most professional, accountable, and honorable way. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Village of Glencoe and Board of Trustees of the Village of Glencoe, Illinois, express on behalf of all the citizens of the Village of Glencoe their appreciation to Barbara Miller on her outstanding service and commitment to the community. Be it further resolved that this resolution be spread upon the minutes of this proceeding, and that an executed copy of this resolution, inscribed with the signature of the village president and bearing the corporate seal of the Village of Glencoe, as attested by the village clerk, be presented to Barbara Miller, dated this 17th day of June, AD 2021, at the Village of Glencoe, Cook County, Illinois. And then it would be signed by the village president, and the Phil Corrali is the village clerk.
Well, thank you very much. It's a bit overwhelming to hear all that, some of which I don't even remember. And of course, you know, everything, as you all know, everything we all do is done as part of a team. And I'm sure you all join me in acknowledging that the team is made better by our excellent staff. And I have always been very lucky in who my colleagues were on the various boards and commissions I've been on. So I'm going to miss all of you. Thank you very much for this. It meant a lot to me.
Thank you, Barbara. Let me say, I didn't get to serve with you on the village board, but you were the boss when I got onto the zoning board, and I learned a ton. I am personally grateful for your service to the town. And you may think you're done, but we're not done putting the arm on you to help us and the rest of the town. So with that, is there a motion to approve the resolution concerning our former trustee, Barbara Miller?
Yes, so moved.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Phil, could you do a roll call?
Trustee Hallwax.
Yes.
Trustee Listener.
Yes.
Trustee Onderdonk.
Yes.
Trustee Rubin.
Yes.
Trustee Vree.
Yes.
Congratulations. The village is way better for your service.
Thank you again, and carry on. Got some great issues, and I look forward to watching from the sidelines.
Oh, I think we're going to put you in charge of Poppy's social.
Of what?
Poppy's.
Oh gosh. Yeah, that's meaty. All right, take care, everybody.
Thank you, Barbara.
Bye-bye.
The next item on the village president's report is consideration of a proclamation declaring June 2021 as Pride Month in the village of Glencoe. The proclamation has been circulated and submitted, so I'm not going to read it. Unless there's any discussion, I would request a motion to approve. And a second.
So moved.
Second. Thank you. There's been a motion and a second. Could we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Hallwax.
Yes.
Trustee Listener.
Yes.
Trustee Onderdonk.
Yes.
Trustee Rubin.
Yes.
Trustee Vree.
Okay, I think the motion has passed. So that takes me to the next item, which is consideration of a proclamation declaring June 19th, 2021 as Juneteenth in the village of Glencoe. That proclamation has also previously been circulated, so I'm not going to read it. I would note that we're getting in just at the same time as the federal government, so we're getting there on time. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Could we have a roll call, please?
Trustee Hallwax.
Yes.
Trustee Listener.
Yes.
Trustee Onderdonk.
Yes.
Trustee Rubin.
Yes.
Trustee Vree.
Yes.
The motion carries. Thank you. We should be proud of both of those. That takes care of the village president's report. So the next item for our meeting is the consent agenda. This is a virtual meeting, and what I'll ask is to have the village manager read the titles of the items on the consent agenda, and then we'll have a motion concerning the consent agenda.
Certainly. Thank you, President Rowan. The first item on the consent agenda is item 7A, the May 2021 Village Treasurer's Report and Glencoe Golf Club Financial Report. Item 7B, the May 2021 Check Register for the Village of Glencoe and Glencoe Golf Club. Item 7C, ratification of the May 2021 Early Check Register List. Item 7D, consideration of the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report and Management Letter from Lauterbach and Amon LLP for the stub year ending December 31st, 2020. And finally, item 7E, consideration of a resolution authorizing the village manager to execute a contract with Atlas Bobcat of Elk Grove, Illinois for purchase of 2 Bobcat compact track loaders for a not to exceed cost of $114,944.
Does anyone want to discuss any of those items on the consent agenda, which were circulated in writing to everybody and to the public? If not, is there, let me just say one thing about the Bobcats. Those are going to help us with our sidewalk plowing, but they also can be used for other things. So we're pretty happy about those. With that, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Thank you. Let's have a roll call.
Trustee Hallwax.
Yes.
Trustee Listener.
Yes.
Trustee Onderdonk.
Yes.
Trustee Rubin.
Yes.
Trustee Vree.
Yes.
Okay, that takes care of the consent agenda. The next item for our meeting is regular business. These two items concern, they're related, items A and B. They concern the bond issuance and capital expenditures. And what I'd like to do is have our finance director, Nikki Larson, present these two items. And then I think the hope is that we would be able to vote on them together in a single vote. So Nikki, have at it.
Thank you, President Rowan. Good evening to the village board. So I'm happy to report more good finance news this evening. This is a little unusual. This is a lot of good news for us, so we're enjoying it right now. We had a wonderful bond sale this morning, and we have Mark Geratina from Spear Financial, who is our financial advising firm. He will be speaking in just a moment on how the bond sale went. But just before we get into that, a few notes of how we got here today. If you can believe this, we did start talking about this last year in 2020. It does feel like a long time ago, with marking the beginning of this process with the approval of the bond referendum ballot question by the board in December of 2020. Then in April 2021, we were fortunate enough to have overwhelming support from the community to allow us to issue up to $10 million in bonds, and that was placed on the April 2021 ballot. Following the approval of the referendum, we had finance committee discussion in May as to how we would go about issuing those $10 million in bonds. And based off of the recommendations in terms of project timelines, we did move forward with a $7 million bond issue this year, and we'll issue the remaining $3 million in a future year, which is tentatively earmarked for 2022 or 2023. Following the Finance Committee discussion, we had a ratings call with S&P Global Ratings. That was a very intensive call. The village did get special recognition for the adoption of its police pension funding policy earlier this year, and our AAA rating was affirmed with a stable outlook, which was a very positive feedback from S&P Global Ratings. In terms of the bond issue itself, based off of what we had presented to the community and what we believe is possible to complete in the next 3 years, the scope of work for this $7 million will include just over $2.5 million in storm sewer improvements, $820,000 in sanitary sewer, $350,000 in sidewalks, $210,000 in street lighting improvements, and then the overwhelming majority of the bond issue will be spent on our street program. And that will be based on priority and obviously coordinating all of these projects together. And now I'll turn it over to Mark to talk a little bit more about today's sale.
Thanks, Nikki, and good evening, everyone. As Nikki mentioned this morning, we did hold a bond sale for the Village's Series 2021 bonds, and we received significant interest from the bond market. There were a total of 30 bids from 5 different bidders, and the winning bidder was FHN Financial with a 1.656% interest rate over 20 years. The cover bid was a 1.677%, so it was a very competitive bond sale. And interest rates on municipal bonds continue to be near record lows, so it was a great time for the village to issue these referendum bonds. As Nikki mentioned, the affirmation of the village's AAA bond rating helped with this low interest rate. The average annual debt service payment is just over $450,000, and the bonds are scheduled to close on July 1st, which is when the village will receive its funds. Overall, we thought the process went very well, and we recommend that the low bid by FHN Financial be accepted, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mark. To just close out the presentation before we take questions, the action items that are presented before you this evening, there was a draft ordinance and a resolution included in this evening's packet. The updated ordinance has been distributed to the board. That includes the final figures based off of the sale that happened this morning. So we are asking for the board's consideration of not only the ordinance providing for the issue of approximately 7 million in general obligation bonds, but also to allow us to reimburse ourselves for any expenses related to these projects that could be incurred between now and the time of the bond closing. Because of the size and scale of the projects, that is possible that we would incur some expense between now and then. And happy to answer any questions
Nikki,
for me or Mark.
Nikki, what's an example of that kind of expense?
So that may be an engineering expense on an existing contract that we have, prepping for the projects. We do have a 3-year time limit to expend the proceeds of the bonds. So we would want to get started on that as soon as possible.
I would just echo Director Larson's comments that she and I were watching the bond auction this morning, and it is kind of a thrill to watch and to see interest rates at the levels that we saw them this morning are truly something special. The board should be very proud of the work that it has done to shepherd the village's finances to put us in the position to be able to so effectively utilize these resources on behalf of our community. These interest rates are really quite something, and it's very exciting overall.
Phil, let me say, since I just got here, I can't claim any credit at all. So I want to say the credit goes to the board members who were there when they did this, and it really goes to the village manager and the finance director and their staffs for getting this done. So great work, which benefits all the residents of Glencoe who have to spend less money on this than maybe other towns that are less financially responsible than we've been shown to be. Are there any questions, or if not, is there a motion to approve the 2 items that our finance director has put forward?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Let's have a roll call.
Trustee Hallwax.
Yes.
Trustee Listener.
Yes.
Trustee Onderdonk.
Yes.
Trustee Rubin.
Yes.
Trustee Vree.
Yes.
The motion has carried, and these 2 items are approved. We're getting towards the end. Is there any other business that any member of the board would like to discuss? I don't see any takers. Jordan, have we gotten any public comments that haven't already been read?
No, we did not receive any additional comment.
Okay. There isn't a closed session tonight. Thank you, everybody. We accomplished a lot. And I'm grateful to everybody for their participation throughout. We did well for our town. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
Second. Oh, there's a motion and a second. Village Manager Corrali, let's have a roll call.
Trustee Hallwax,
Yes.
trustee Listener,
Yes.
trustee Onderdonk,
Yes.
trustee Rubin,
Yes.
trustee Vree.
Yes.
The motion carries. Thank you, everyone, tonight, including Steve Elrod.